Hey everyone, and welcome. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for this explainer. Today, we're going on a really fascinating journey. We are going to trace the anatomy of a haunting, moving all the way from some of the most famous, highly engineered pop culture scares on television straight back to centuries-old folklore. And then? Well then, we are going to look at some seriously chilling modern-day encounters reported by everyday people. We're basically going to deconstruct how a ghost story is built, why it terrifies us so much, and why it endures generation after generation.
But before we get into all of that, let me ask you something. Have you ever been driving alone late at night, the road is completely empty, your headlights are just barely cutting through the pitch black darkness, and you get that sudden creeping anxiety? You know the one, that distinct feeling that maybe, just maybe, you aren't actually alone in the car? Okay, let's dive into this and explore exactly why the paranormal roadside holds such a massive grip on our collective imagination. Starting us off with Section 1, Anatomy of a Haunting. To really understand how these stories are built from the ground up, we need to look at a masterclass in modern horror. Let's examine the opening scene of the hit television show Supernatural. In the pilot episode, you've got a young man driving down a dark, wooded road. He spots this beautiful woman in a flowing white dress and, of course, pulls over. She gets into his passenger seat, seductively asking him to take her home to this abandoned, dilapidated house near a bridge. But when they arrive, the scare is just brilliantly engineered. The woman utters this incredibly tragic phrase, "I can never go home," and boom, she vanishes from the passenger seat, only to violently reappear right in his rearview mirror, in the back seat, leading to a fatal crash. The show's writers created this character, Constance. She's a ghost who was cheated on, drowned her own children in a fit of temporary insanity, and now eternally targets unfaithful men near that bridge. It's an absolutely terrifying sequence, but it didn't just come out of nowhere. It's actually a meticulous blend of ancient myths. Which brings us to Section 2, the vanishing hitchhiker. So this brings us to our first foundational myth. This concept of a passenger just disappearing from a moving vehicle is famously known as the vanishing hitchhiker. And according to the extensive research of folklorist Jan Brunvand, this legend didn't start with modern cars. No way. It actually stretches back centuries, adapting perfectly to whatever era of history it happens to find itself in. Just look at how this story evolves right alongside human transportation. You can trace the prototype all the way back to the 1st century in the New Testament, where the Apostle Philip is picked up by an Ethiopian driving a chariot, only to disappear after a baptism. By the Middle Ages, the story had morphed into ghostly riders hitching rides on horseback across Europe. Fast forward to the 1940s, and it's Dr. Eckersall picking up a girl in a sheer evening gown in his roadster on Route 1. It became so deeply ingrained in American culture that by 1998, Kmart was literally using the vanishing hitchhiker trope to sell Route 66 jeans in a TV commercial. Now, what's really interesting here are the specific, recurring motifs documented by researchers at Snopes. It is almost always a lone female on a dark road who completely vanishes from an enclosed vehicle. Often, the driver lends her a sweater or a coat, only to find it later draped over her tombstone. Wild, right? And in a totally fascinating subset of this myth, the hitchhiker operates as a vanishing prophet. Right around World War II, this massively popular rumor spread about a hitchhiker who correctly predicted there was a dead body in a driver's car, and then prophesied the impending death of Adolf Hitler before completely disappearing into thin air. And that perfectly sets up Section 3, the legend of La Llorona. So the Supernatural episode didn't just use the vanishing hitchhiker. They actually layered it with a second foundational myth, shifting our focus from the asphalt highway to the water. This is the deeply tragic, globally recognized legend of the Weeping Woman, widely known in Mexican folklore as La Llorona. The legend tells the heartbreaking origin of Maria, a beautiful woman who drowned her own children in a river to be with a lover who ultimately rejected her. Overcome with immense grief and guilt, she took her own life. But the lore says she was denied entry to heaven until she could find her kids. So now her spirit eternally wanders the waterways in a flowing white dress, just weeping and crying out, "Where are my children?" When you compare these two distinct legends side by side, you can see exactly how they operate. It's like a giant puzzle. On one side, the vanishing hitchhiker is totally tied to roads and transit, driven by the anxieties of travel, trying to get home or delivering catastrophic warnings. On the flip side, La Llorona is entirely tied to the water, driven by this heavy, paralyzing grief and the burden of eternal punishment. One is very much a ghost of the journey, while the other is a ghost of consequence. Let's dig into why this happens in Section 4, the psychology of travel. So why do these specific archetypes endure across centuries and entirely different cultures? To really understand that, we have to move past the folklore itself and look at the actual psychology of travel. These stories survive because they prey on our natural vulnerabilities when we are in transit. Think about it. When we travel, we leave the safety of our homes. We're isolated or in the dark, and our minds just start to play tricks on us. This brings us to an absolutely crucial psychological concept, the liminal space. A liminal space is a transitional zone. It's that lonely highway at 2 a.m. It's the dilapidated bridge you have to cross to get to the other side. You aren't at your origin, and you aren't at your destination. You are in an in-between state, and in that state, the boundary between the known and the unknown really starts to blur. This is exactly why crossing a dark bridge instinctively makes us question our safety and our reality. We just feel exposed.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what the writers of Supernatural did. They created a master blueprint of a haunting by perfectly merging these elements. They took La Llorona's tragic, emotional backstory, the cheating husband, the drowned children, the weeping woman in white, and they dropped her directly into the vanishing hitchhiker's terrifying liminal setting, the dark road, jumping into cars, and the transitional space of the bridge. They literally weaponized our psychological fear of travel with the profound emotional depth of ancient folklore.
But what happens when fiction becomes reality? Let's look at Section 5, Real Modern Ghost Stories.
Now, it's pretty easy to analyze television shows and ancient folklore in a vacuum, right? But what happens when these exact same tropes are reported by real people today? Let's shift our focus to documented reality by pulling from the Tell Me a Ghost Story podcast, which is an archive of real callers sharing their unexplainable encounters. Take this documented call from Angela in upstate New York. She was driving on Route 9 at 2 a.m. in complete darkness when she encountered a woman in a long white dress standing perfectly motionless in the middle of the road. As Angela slowed down to help, she noticed something genuinely terrifying, a strange man emerging from the trees approaching her car. And the woman in white, Angela reported that her face was entirely wrong. Her mouth was too large. Her eyes were like black holes. Now, whether this was a true paranormal manifestation or just dangerous criminals exploiting local folklore to ambush travelers in a liminal space, the visceral terror of that encounter is 100% real. Then we have a call from Greg in Echo Park, Los Angeles. He called in to detail this incredibly unsettling childhood encounter with a lady in white. Think about that for a second. We just spent all this time tracing the lady in white and the vanishing hitchhiker back centuries through different cultures, and here we have modern, everyday people actively reporting encounters with the exact same centuries-old archetypes right in their own neighborhoods. And the calls, they just keep coming. Rock in Orange County walked out into the middle of the night and found a woman crying on the sidewalk, perfectly echoing the weeping grief of La Llorona. Sapphire pulled up to a four-way traffic stop on a regular Thursday and saw a woman in a bright red skirt with glowing, honey-colored eyes standing perfectly still. Linda, a restaurant worker, recounted a lady in red who completely vanished before her eyes in a 1970s diner. The settings change, sure, but the core archetypes, the weeping woman, the vanishing figure in a liminal space, they remain strikingly, almost impossibly consistent. All of this leaves us with a final thought to consider. We can map the folklore, we can trace the Hollywood scripts, and we can define the psychology of liminal spaces all we want, but the fact remains that people are still seeing these figures on lonely roads today. So the next time you find yourself driving alone at night, crossing a dark bridge with the radio turned low, look in your rearview mirror. Are you absolutely sure who is really in the back seat with you? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope you walk away with a deeper understanding of the shadows on the road ahead. Stay curious and, for sure, drive safe.